When a school bully dared Keanu Reeves to sing at a talent show, everyone thought it was a joke, until he walked on stage. What no one knew was that Keanu had been hiding a voice and a pain he hadn't shared in decades. But when the first note left his lips, the world stopped listening to laugh. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The auditorium of Ridge Valley High buzzed with a mix of anticipation and teenage indifference. Foldable chairs squeaked against the polished gym floor as students shifted in their seats, whispering guesses about who the final guest speaker might be. A few teachers hovered near the entrance, exchanging excited glances, trying, but failing, to keep the suspense under wrap. Then the principal stepped up to the mic and cleared her throat. Our final guest today needs no introduction. Please welcome Mr. Keanu Reeves. At first, there was silence, followed by a ripple of disbelief, then an eruption of murmurs, gasps, and hastily drawn phones. The students surged forward in their seats. Cameras flashed. A few even stood up. Down the side aisle walked Keanu, dressed in jeans, boots, and a plain black blazer. No entourage, no announcement, just a small nod to the teachers as he made his way to the front of the stage. Among the crowd sat 16-year-old Lily Brennan, hunched in her seat, face pale. She sank lower into her hoodie, burying herself between two friends. "Oh my God," whispered Ava beside her. "Is that your godfather? Like, that Keanu Reeves?" Lily barely nodded. "He didn't tell me he was coming." From the front of the gym, Keanu reached the mic. His voice was soft but unmistakable. "Hey, I know career day usually isn't the highlight of the school year, so thanks for letting me drop in." He smiled faintly and ran a hand through his hair. "I was shooting a movie nearby and heard this was happening. I figured maybe I could say a few things about the path that isn't so straightforward." The room quieted. Even the students who had been scrolling through their phones now looked up. Keanu spoke simply about his early years, about rejection, about the first time he ever got a call back, about how he never thought he'd be a career actor, just someone doing what he could to pay the rent. And then he said something that made Lily grip the sides of her chair. "I'm here today not because I planned to be, but because someone I care about goes to this school. She's been through a lot this year, and I just wanted to show up." Lily's cheeks went crimson. She stared at her shoes as the students turned to glance at her. Some already knew. Others were putting it together. Principal Lang smiled nervously from the side of the stage. "We can take a couple of questions before we wrap, if that's all right." Keanu nodded, stepping back. Hands shot up, but one rose higher and quicker than the rest. It was Derek Walsh, the class clown, school-wide prankster, captain of the sarcasm team, unofficially. He stood up before being called on. "Mr. Reeves," he began, voice dripping with mock respect. "You're obviously a talented actor, but, do you have any other skills? Like, real ones?" A few chuckles rippled through the gym. Even some teachers shifted uncomfortably. Derek didn't sit down. He continued, "can you juggle? Do magic tricks? Do anything besides, look serious on camera?" Keanu tilted his head slightly. His expression didn't change. Lily wanted to disappear. Ava whispered, "Is this guy seriously doing this right now?" Derek shrugged and pushed it further. "I mean, we've got a school talent show next Friday. Maybe you should sign up. Show us what else you've got." More laughter followed. A few students clapped mockingly. One boy near the back muttered loud enough for others to hear, "Yeah, let's see if John Wick can do stand-up." Principal Lang stepped toward the mic. "Okay, that's enough." But Keanu gently reached out and stopped her. Still facing Derek, he smiled, soft and even. "Sure," he said. The room froze. "I'll do it," Keanu repeated casually. "Thanks for the invite." A beat of stunned silence passed before the room erupted, not in laughter, but noise, confusion, shock. Some students cheered, others blinked, waiting to see if it was a joke. Derek's smug expression faltered. Wait, what? Keanu folded his hands loosely in front of him. Next Friday, right? Talent show. I'm in. Lily's heart sank. Her stomach twisted. She stared at Keanu like he had just betrayed her in front of the entire planet. Principal Lang, clearly blindsided, stepped back to the mic. Well, I suppose we'll make space in the program. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Keanu gave a polite nod, looking forward to it. As the students buzzed with energy, the bell rang to dismiss them from the assembly. The noise level tripled instantly. Backpacks zipped, shoes scraped across the gym floor. Lily didn't move. She sat completely still, watching her godfather walk calmly through the crowd toward the side doors, stopping to shake a few hands, offering that same gentle smile, like it was no big deal. But to Lily, it was a disaster. The whispers followed her all the way down the hall. Is that really her uncle? What's he gonna do, read a script? Earl's gonna embarrass himself. Or us. Or both. Ava grabbed her arm. You okay? Lily didn't answer. By the time she made it to her locker, she felt dizzy. The echo of Derek's taunt, "Do anything real?" kept playing in her head. And Keanu had said yes. She hadn't told anyone he was coming because she didn't think he would. She hadn't even told him about the talent show. And now, the entire school was going to be watching him, judging her. What had he been thinking? And more importantly, what was he going to do? Because if he bombed, it wouldn't just be his reputation at stake. It would be hers. That afternoon, Lily avoided the lunchroom. She ducked into the art wing, her usual escape when the hallways got too loud. She paced between the display cases of old student paintings and metalwork, trying to wrap her head around what had just happened. Why would he do that? Keanu wasn't reckless. He was quiet, thoughtful, careful with his choices, but agreeing to perform at a school talent show, with teenagers live streaming every second and the local press probably sniffing around, that didn't sound like him. Her phone buzzed again, more messages. Ava, dude, what is happening? Is he gonna sing or something? Alan M., does he actually have a talent? Or is this a PR thing? Derek, you better tell your uncle to bring cue cards. Lily stuffed the phone in her pocket. Her stomach churned. She barely made it through fourth period. During chemistry, two sophomores in front of her whispered about whether Keanu would do matrix moves on stage. One even suggested he might bring stunt wires. By the end of the day, the auditorium sign-up sheet had been moved from the office to the front hall, and someone had already added his name. Slot 14, Keanu Reeves. It was real. On the drive home, Lily sat stiffly in the passenger seat of her mom's SUV. Keanu was in the back, unusually quiet. She finally turned around. When did you say yes? He looked out the window for a moment, as if studying the rows of oak trees rolling past. Because someone challenged me, he said simply. Lily frowned. But it was a joke. He was trying to humiliate you. Keanu nodded slightly. Yeah, I could tell. Then why? Her voice cracked. He leaned forward between the seats. Because if I'd said no, everyone would have laughed anyway. Just in a different way. Her mom glanced at them in the mirror, but didn't speak. Keanu's voice softened. Sometimes, the best answer to mockery is to take it seriously, even if it wasn't meant that way. But what are you going to do? Lily asked. What's your talent? He looked at her with a small smile. Haven't decided yet. That was not the answer she wanted. By the time they got home, her nerves were fraying. She stomped upstairs, shut her door, and flopped on her bed. She felt cornered, trapped between protecting her godfather's image and her own. The school was buzzing. The town would be watching. Social media had already started speculating. And the worst part? She had no idea what Keanu was planning. Downstairs, Keanu unpacked his overnight bag and sat quietly on the edge of the guest bed, hands folded in his lap. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves in the backyard. And in that moment, even with all the noise surrounding him, Keanu looked perfectly calm, like he knew something no one else did, like he was waiting for the world to catch up. That evening, the house quieted early. Vanessa had retreated to her room with a novel and a glass of wine, worn from a long day at the clinic. Lily stayed upstairs, headphones on, supposedly doing homework, but her mind buzzed too loudly for focus. Keanu, meanwhile, moved through the living room with a stillness that seemed deliberate, almost ceremonial. He stood before the small bookcase in the corner, where Vanessa kept old photo albums and a few sentimental keepsakes. Wedged between a volume of poetry and a forgotten piano theory manual was a narrow drawer, barely noticeable unless you knew to look. He pulled it open. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed, hand-drafted, no return address, just one word, faintly written in cursive across the seal. Listen. He paused, fingers resting on the paper. This wasn't something he had planned to revisit. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. But mockery had a strange way of waking sleeping things. He carried the envelope to the dining table and sat down, the overhead light casting a soft glow. With care, he peeled open the flap. Inside was a folded page, its edges feathered from time. Not a letter, but a handwritten musical score. Staff lines carefully inked, notes drawn with quiet intention. And in the top right corner, a title, Only the Quiet Remain. Keanu exhaled, long and slow. He hadn't seen this piece in over 2 decades, not since Yasuo. He traced the first few bars with his eyes, not touching, just remembering. The opening was spare. Minor chords, suspended rests, meant to be played slowly, like a whispered memory unfolding in a dark room. Yasuo Tanaka had written it for him, back when Keanu was barely more than a boy, back when grief had no language and music was the only way to speak. Yasuo never called it a gift. He simply said it belonged to Keanu now, and someday he'd know why. For years, Keanu had buried it, not out of resentment, but reverence. He wasn't ready. The world wasn't ready. And some songs, Yasuo once told him, were meant to be kept until silence needed a voice. Tonight, the silence had grown loud enough. He stood, walked over to the upright piano near the window. A modest Yamaha Vanessa had rescued from a church auction. It hadn't been tuned in ages, but that didn't matter. He lifted the lid, let his fingers hover over the keys. He didn't play. Not yet. Instead, he stared at the score again, noticing details he'd forgotten. Pencil marks in the margins, breath marks where Yasuo had taught him to pause, not for effect, but for feeling. A small smudge in the lower corner, maybe from his own teenage thumb all those years ago. Upstairs, Lily pulled off her headphones. A faint sound had stirred her. Not music, not speech, just movement. She cracked open her bedroom door and crept down the hallway, stopping just before the stairs. From the landing, she could see him. Keanu sat at the piano, perfectly still, the score laid flat in front of him. She didn't speak, didn't move. She watched. And then, just as the house seemed to hold its breath, he began to play. Not loudly, not with any performance in mind, but tenderly, like someone handling something breakable, something beloved. The first notes fell into the air like snowflakes. Soft, inevitable, slow. Lily's hand clutched the stair rail. She had never heard him play, didn't even know he could. The melody meandered through the room, delicate but full. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't modern. It was honest. grief and grace braided together in each phrase, as if every note carried weight from a different part of his life. He played the entire first page, then stopped. The silence after felt deeper somehow, like the song had drawn the house into a different kind of stillness. Keanu sat for a moment longer, staring at the final measure. Then he closed the score. His hands rested on the piano lid, not clenched, just settled. Behind him, Lily slowly stepped down one stair, then another. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The look on her face said everything. Maybe this wasn't a joke. Maybe this was something else entirely. The drive home was quiet, but not peacefully so. The kind of silence that buzzed with unspoken thoughts. Keanu sat in the back seat of the SUV, arms resting loosely on his knees, staring out at the oak-lined streets of Ridge Valley. Up front, Vanessa gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual, and in the passenger seat, Lily kept her gaze fixed on the road. Her shoulders tense, jaw clenched. When they pulled into the driveway, Lily didn't wait. She unbuckled her seatbelt and marched toward the front door, not bothering to hold it open behind her. Keanu stepped out slowly, taking in the fading sunset, then followed them inside. The moment the door clicked shut, Lily spun around in the hallway. "What were you thinking?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. Keanu blinked, calmly slipping off his boots. "You said yes, in front of everyone. You don't even know what the talent show is. You don't sing, you don't dance. You're not a magician." "I'm aware," Keanu said, placing his shoes neatly by the bench. "Then why did you do it?" she pressed. "You saw what Derek was doing. He was making fun of you. Making fun of me." Keanu looked up, his voice gentle. "Because sometimes, the best way to answer a joke is to take it seriously." Lily threw up her hands. "So now you're just performing at a high school talent show with parents and classmates and God knows who else filming every second?" Vanessa stepped in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. "Lily." But Lily didn't stop. "People are gonna laugh. You saw their faces. This whole thing is just a big setup for a punchline." Keanu stepped into the living room, unbothered. Maybe. Or maybe it's something else. Lily folded her arms, still standing by the door. "Like what?" He paused, then said quietly, "Sometimes silence needs a stage." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" Keanu didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved to the bookshelf and pulled out a thin, time-worn folder tucked between two framed photos. Lily recognized it. He'd had it for years, but she'd never seen him open it. He held it for a moment, then sat at the dining table, resting the folder gently in front of him. His fingers lingered on the edges, like touching something fragile from another life. "I'll be careful," he said, mostly to himself. Lily watched him, confused. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. Just still. Like he had already made peace with whatever came next. "I just don't want people to mock you," she said softly. Keanu looked up. "They might." "Then why do it?" He smiled faintly. "Because I'm not doing it for them." And with that, he opened the folder. Lily stood frozen, uncertain, then slowly turned away and went upstairs. Keanu remained seated, eyes fixed on the paper in front of him. He hadn't seen this music in years, but it had waited, and so had he. Long before the fame, the interviews, and the myth of Keanu Reeves, there was just a quiet teenage boy who walked alone after school. At 15, he didn't belong to any group. He wasn't the jock, the rebel, or the class clown. He drifted through the hallways like a shadow, polite but distant, the kind of boy teachers remembered for his silence more than anything he said. His mother worked double shifts, his stepfather had left, and most afternoons, Keanu spent hours wandering between the library and the edge of the city park, pretending not to notice the ache in his chest. The kind of ache you don't know how to name when you're young. That was the year he first met Yusuke Arata. He wasn't looking for music. In fact, he'd never considered singing at all. But one rainy afternoon, Keanu ducked into a narrow alley to avoid the downpour. That's where he saw the faded sign. It read, "Voice Studio Y. Arata." The door beneath it was slightly ajar, with a warm orange light flickering behind a curtain. There was no music playing, no sound at all, except for the hum of the rain against the roof. Something made him stop. He peeked in, ready to walk away if anyone noticed. But instead, a calm voice called out from inside, "You might as well come in. You're already halfway here." Keanu froze, then, awkwardly, pushed the door open wider. The room smelled of dust and old wood. A grand piano stood at the center, its keys slightly yellowed. Along the walls, shelves sagged with music books, opera scores, and handwritten sheet music. And seated beside the piano was an older man in a gray sweater, tuning a stringed instrument with methodical precision. He looked up with sharp eyes. "You're not here for lessons," the man said. Keanu hesitated. "No, sir." "Then why are you standing in my doorway?" Keanu shrugged. "Just waiting for the rain to pass." The man nodded once. "Then you can sit while it does." That was how it started. Yusuke Arata had once been a classical tenor. He performed in Tokyo, Vienna, and New York before disappearing from the public eye in the late 70s. What few knew was that Yusuke had survived 2 wars, lost his voice to injury, and rebuilt it over time. Not for the stage, but for the students who found him. He didn't advertise, didn't audition. He chose students by instinct, and only those who, as he put it, sounded silent. Keanu never sang that first day, but he listened. And when the rain cleared and he stood to leave, Yusuke said, "Come back tomorrow. Bring no excuses." The next day, Keanu returned, and the day after that. He never told anyone. Not his mother, not his teachers. It was his own secret world. Yusuke taught without praise. He never said, "Good job." He never smiled at the end of a song. But he listened like every note mattered. And in that room, Keanu's voice slowly woke up. Yusuke's methods were different. He didn't teach songs. He taught breath, stillness, intention. He would make Keanu stand in front of the cracked mirror for minutes in silence. No sound, just posture and breath. "A singer's voice," he said, "is shaped long before sound begins." Keanu didn't understand at first. He thought singing was about hitting the right notes. But Yusuke insisted it was about something deeper. "The voice must carry truth," he once told him, "or it carries nothing." Over time, Keanu began to understand. They worked through vowel shaping, throat release, diaphragmatic control. But more than the technique, it was the emotion that Yusuke cared about. He would stop Keanu mid-phrase and say, "That note was correct, but what were you saying with it?" And if Keanu didn't know, they'd start again. Yusuke never raised his voice, never rushed. He taught with silence between each instruction, as if every pause had its own weight. It was exhausting at times, but strangely comforting. Keanu didn't talk much in those days, but with Yusuke, he didn't need to. Their conversations were mostly nods, gestures, or a few words spoken in a language that music made possible. In the corner of the studio sat a small photograph, Yusuke and a young man in uniform. It was faded, the frame slightly cracked. Keanu never asked about it, and Yusuke never offered an explanation. One day, Keanu arrived to find the piano covered. Yusuke was sitting quietly, his hands folded, a notebook resting on his lap. He looked more tired than usual. Without greeting, he said, "Do you know why you're here?" Keanu stood still, unsure how to answer. Yusuke continued, "Most people come to me hoping to be heard. You didn't." Keanu swallowed. "I just didn't want to feel invisible." Yusuke nodded slowly. "Exactly. That is why you sing." He opened the notebook and handed Keanu a sheet of handwritten music. The title read, "Only the Quiet Remain." "I wrote this for you," he said. Keanu stared at the page. "Why?" "Because someday, the silence in you will need a home, and this will be it." It was the first and only time Yusuke offered something personal. No critique, no corrections, just a gift. That winter, Keanu sang it once, in the studio. Just the two of them. No recording, no piano, only voice. When the final note faded, Yusuke closed his eyes. He didn't say a word. But something in the air felt complete. A week later, Yusuke passed away. No ceremony, no notice in the paper, just a note left behind in a sealed envelope addressed to Keanu. Inside it were 7 words. "Your voice is for those without one." He never sang again. Not in public, not in private. He folded the sheet music, sealed it away, and buried it in the back of a drawer. Life moved on. Films came, roles. But the silence inside him never quite left, and neither did Yusuke's voice. In the years that followed, Keanu rarely spoke of that chapter in his life, not out of shame, but preservation. It had been something sacred, something untouched by agents, interviews, or red carpets. A quiet place he could visit in memory, but never out loud. He kept the sheet music tucked between the pages of an old novel on his shelf. Whenever he moved, it came with him. Not in a music case or a folder, just quietly hidden, the way all precious things tend to travel. Sometimes, during long nights alone in hotel rooms between shoots, he'd think about Yusuke's studio, the smell of rosin and worn wood, the way the floor creaked just before the high notes, the weight of that single performance, his voice unaccompanied, trembling in the stillness. He would close his eyes and hear it again, not as a song, but as a feeling. But he never sang it again. The world never asked him to, and he never offered, until now. As he sat at the kitchen table in Vanessa's house, the handwritten score unfolded before him. Keanu couldn't explain why the timing felt right. He just knew it did. Maybe it was the look in Lily's eyes, the fear that the world would laugh before it listened. Maybe it was Derek's smug challenge. Or maybe it was something deeper, something old, something waiting. He ran a finger along the notes. The ink had faded, but the message hadn't. Only the quiet remained. He remembered the final lesson Yusuke ever gave him. Not with words, not with song, but with silence. That day, after the song was done and Yusuke had closed his eyes, they sat in stillness for a full hour. No instruction, no farewell, just presence. It was his way of saying goodbye. And now Keanu understood. Some performances aren't for applause, they're for closure. He rose from the table and placed the sheet back in the folder. Upstairs, Lily's footsteps creaked faintly above. He heard her pause, then continue walking. He didn't expect her to understand, not yet. But the song that once saved him had waited long enough. In the morning, he would call the school. He would ask if they had access to a piano. He would ask where the rehearsals were held. And when the time came, he would step onto that stage. Not as an actor, not as a celebrity, but as a boy who once sang for no one, and who now sang for everyone who had ever been told to stay silent. The voice he buried wasn't gone. It had simply been waiting, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone to need it. And maybe that someone was Lily. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was every kid who ever walked through school hallways unseen. Whatever the reason, he would sing, not to be heard, but to speak. The next morning, Keanu called the high school and asked to speak to Principal Lang. He explained that he wanted access to the auditorium after hours to rehearse. At first, there was a long pause on the other end, then a surprised but polite yes. The school had a standing policy for students to rehearse in the evenings. No one had expected him to actually follow through. By that afternoon, word had already begun to circulate. Keanu Reeves was rehearsing. Not filming, not posing for photos, rehearsing. Still, no one knew what exactly he was planning. That evening, Keanu returned to the school alone. The building was mostly empty, save for a few students wrapping up extracurriculars and janitors making their rounds. He made his way down the long hallway to the auditorium. The lights were low, the stage bare, but a single piano waited near center stage. As he stepped inside, someone was already seated at the piano, flipping through a folder of vocal warm-ups. Sophia Cho. She stood when she saw him, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're actually doing this," she said. "I am," Keanu replied. Sophia had only graduated Juilliard 2 years earlier. She was young, focused, and not easily impressed. She'd returned to Ridge Valley after her father passed away and had been volunteering part-time at the school to help students with music and vocal technique. Her reputation was growing, students liked her, teachers respected her, but she kept a low profile. When she heard Keanu Reeves wanted to rehearse in her auditorium, she assumed it was a joke. But now, standing across from him, she realized he wasn't smiling. "You're singing?" she asked. "I'm trying to. Do you have any background?" He nodded. "Some." She raised an eyebrow. "How much is some?" "It's been a while." She paused, then gestured to the edge of the stage. "Let's find out." He stepped forward. The first 20 minutes were rough. She ran him through a basic warm-up. His pitch was solid but inconsistent. His vowels drifted. His posture was fine, but he didn't support the tone fully. Still, something about his voice caught her attention. Not its perfection, but its honesty. It was raw, raspy in the upper range, darker in the lower, and behind the tone was something else, something lived in, a kind of weariness that couldn't be taught. When he finished the last exercise, Sophia sat quietly for a moment. "You're not trained," she said finally, "but there's something in your voice." Keanu tilted his head. "Is that a good thing?" "It's not a bad thing," she replied. "It's just different. You don't sound like someone trying to impress anyone." "I'm not." She closed the folder. "Then we'll work with that." He smiled faintly. And just like that, rehearsals began. They met every evening that week. Sophia brought her marked-up score sheets and a small speaker for playback. Keanu brought a water bottle, a pencil, and a kind of quiet focus she rarely saw in professional performers. He didn't complain, didn't fidget. He listened. On the second night, she asked him to sing the melody from the handwritten piece he had brought. Only the quiet remained. He unfolded the sheet carefully, placing it on the piano. Sophia scanned it as he began. She didn't interrupt. It wasn't technically flawless, but the first few lines were enough to freeze her fingers over the keys. His voice broke slightly on the second page, and he looked down, embarrassed. Sophia didn't comment on the mistake. Instead, she leaned forward. "Where did this piece come from?" she asked softly. Keanu hesitated. "It was written by someone I used to know, a long time ago." She nodded. Well, he knew what he was doing. She didn't press further. Instead, they got to work. Sophia adjusted the key to better suit Keanu's current range. She rewrote the bridge to emphasize his lower register and simplified a high passage to give space for his natural tone to resonate. She didn't try to turn him into something he wasn't. She just cleared the path for the voice he already had. By Thursday, the notes came easier. His breathing was more grounded, his phrasing more confident. He still missed pitches now and then, and sometimes forgot to place his consonants. But the emotion was always there, stitched between every syllable. Sophia stood behind the piano, arms crossed, watching as he sang through the second verse again. When he finished, she gave a small nod. "You know," she said, "most singers spend years trying to fake what you do naturally." Keanu blinked. "What's that?" "Make people feel something." He didn't respond, just looked down at the piano keys. Sophia glanced toward the empty chairs in the auditorium. "When you get up there next week, Don't worry about hitting everything perfectly." He looked at her. "What should I worry about?" She smiled. "Mean what you sing. That's it." That night, as they packed up, neither noticed the figure near the back of the auditorium. Lily had slipped in through the side door. She wasn't planning to spy. She just needed to know what her godfather was doing, to understand what he thought he was risking. But what she heard stopped her cold. The voice was quiet, deep, and almost broken. But in the cracks there was something beautiful, like hearing someone confess without words. She stayed hidden in the shadows, watching him lean toward the piano, his shoulders relaxed, the sheet music open in front of him. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some PR stunt. Keanu was really trying. And for the first time all week, Lily didn't feel embarrassed. She felt curious. The next night, Lily came back. She told herself it was just to confirm what she'd heard. Maybe she'd imagined the way his voice had moved through the room. Maybe it had only sounded good because she wasn't expecting anything at all. But when she slipped into the dark corner of the auditorium again, she knew the truth. He was getting better. Each night, his voice carried more certainty. Not louder, not flashier, just clearer, like he was remembering something he'd once known, but had kept buried for a long time. Sophia guided him patiently. She didn't flatter him or overcorrect. She let the music lead. Sometimes, she asked him questions after a take. "What were you thinking in that verse? Who were you singing to?" And he'd give quiet answers, usually just a word or two, but even that was enough. On Friday, she stopped him in the middle of a phrase. "Keanu," she said, "you keep pulling back on this line. Why?" He looked at the page, then at the empty rows of seats. "Because it hurts." Sophia gave a slight nod. "Then sing through it." He stared at the measure for a few seconds, then started again. This time, he didn't hold back. Lily, watching from the back row, felt the difference immediately. The note cracked slightly at the top, but it didn't matter. It felt real, not like a performance, like a memory being released. When he reached the final line, Sophia didn't speak. She just sat still for a long moment, her fingers resting gently on the piano keys. Keanu stepped back, breathing heavily. "That was it," she said quietly. "That's the version." He nodded once, then sat beside her on the edge of the stage. The rehearsal wrapped not long after. Sophia gathered her things, while Keanu carefully folded the sheet music again, the same way he had every night. It was clear he didn't treat it like paper. He treated it like something living. They talked briefly about the stage layout, lighting cues, and mic placement for the talent show. Sophia mentioned that the school technician might need to test the sound system in advance. Keanu agreed, but his focus stayed on the music. He didn't ask about who would be in the audience or how the media might spin it. He just wanted the song to be right. That night, Lily didn't wait for him to leave first. She stayed behind in the shadows as they both exited. When the auditorium finally emptied, she stood up, walked down the center aisle, and stepped onto the stage. She looked at the piano, then at the score still resting on the music stand. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She finally understood what he was doing and why it mattered. Saturday evening at Ridge Valley High was quiet. The school hallways were mostly dark, save for the occasional flicker of motion sensor lights. Maintenance staff moved through their weekend routines. Trash bins were emptied, floors swept, lights checked. In the auditorium, Keanu and Sophia were wrapping up another late rehearsal. This one had run longer than usual. They'd worked on transitions between verses and how to control breath through the final crescendo. Keanu had just nailed a difficult vocal swell, and Sophia had smiled, quietly impressed. Neither of them noticed the faint scuff of a janitor's sneakers echoing behind the door. Louise, the school custodian, had been working nights at Ridge Valley for nearly 10 years. He didn't gossip, didn't intrude, but when he heard a voice coming from the stage, A voice that sounded oddly familiar. He paused near the side door and peered through the narrow glass pane. He didn't intend to eavesdrop. But what he saw stopped him. There, under a single spotlight, was Keanu Reeves, standing behind a microphone, singing. Luis squinted. He thought it was a joke at first, a warm-up for a film role, maybe? But then he heard the voice. It was low, gravelly, not perfect, but there was something in it that made Luis forget why he was holding a mop. The lyrics floated across the room. Soft, haunted, whole. Without thinking, Luis took out his phone. He hit record. Only about 30 seconds of footage, the end of a verse. The way Keanu closed his eyes, tilted his head forward as the final chord lingered. Then Luis slipped away. He didn't show the clip to anyone, not at first. But later that night, sitting alone in the break room, he watched it again and again. Then he uploaded it to his private social media account with a caption that read, "Pretty sure I just saw Keanu Reeves singing at my school." And he wasn't bad. He didn't tag anyone, he didn't expect anything. But within minutes it was being reshared. One student reposted it to a talent show update group. Another sent it to a friend in Los Angeles. By morning, it was everywhere. Some thought it was fake. Others assumed it was AI generated. A few claimed it was part of an upcoming movie and guessed at the plot. But most just commented the same thing over and over. Is this real? Keanu can sing? What is going on? It hit 2 million views by noon. By Sunday afternoon, the clip had been shared across every major platform. One popular account reposted it with the caption, "Keanu Reeves caught in the act of being unexpectedly soulful." Another wrote, "Plot twist, John Wick has pipes." A talk show segment spliced the footage with old movie scenes and jokingly added auto-tune effects. It was everywhere. The original post had no context, no explanation, just a grainy shot of Keanu under dim lighting, singing a few solemn lines with eyes closed. The mystery only added fuel to the fire. In the comments, people speculated wildly. This has to be a bit, like a Funny or Die sketch. Midlife crisis tour incoming. I thought this guy didn't do press. Now he's doing open mics? Some mocked him. Others defended him. But everyone was watching. Sophia found out Monday morning. She was in the staff lounge, pouring coffee before her first class, when a science teacher waved his phone at her. "Hey, your new star student's gone viral." She blinked. What? He turned the screen. There it was, the clip. Already looped, memed, and captioned with everything from sarcasm to sincere praise. Sophia set down her cup and walked out of the room. She found Keanu in the parking lot, standing beside his motorcycle, zipping up his jacket. He was about to leave after a brief meeting with Principal Lang. "You saw it?" she asked. He turned and nodded. Sophia folded her arms. "It wasn't me." "I know. It wasn't you." He shook his head. "A janitor. Luis, I think." She blew out a breath. "We were working on something real. Raw. Now it's trending, under Sad Batman Sings." Keanu offered a half smile. "I didn't watch the hashtags. You should have had a say in when that voice came out." He looked toward the mountains in the distance. "Maybe it came out when it needed to." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "That's very poetic. But this changes things." Keanu didn't flinch. "Or maybe it doesn't. People are going to laugh." He shrugged. "They already were." She stared at him for a moment longer, then relaxed. "You're frustrating," she said. "I get that a lot." They stood there for a beat, the air between them quiet. Then she asked, "So what now?" Keanu looked at the school building behind her. "We keep rehearsing. You're still going to perform?" He nodded. "Even after all this attention?" "I wasn't doing it for attention." Sophia nodded slowly. Then she smiled. "All right," she said. "Then let them wonder." Keanu zipped his jacket the rest of the way, climbed onto the bike, and gave her a quick wave. She watched him ride off down the hill, already knowing they'd have a full house on talent show night. And this time, people wouldn't be coming just to mock. They'd be coming to see if the voice was real. Lily saw the video before school on Monday. She had barely opened her phone when Ava sent it in all caps. "You didn't tell me he could sing. What is this?" Lily tapped the link, heart pounding. It was him. On stage, singing the final verse of Only the Quiet Remain. The angle was far, and the audio was slightly muffled, but there was no mistaking the raw, aching quality in his voice. The comments flooded beneath the clip faster than she could read. Some were mean. "He's just doing this for sympathy. Bet he'll drop an album next week." Others were kinder. "Did not expect to cry watching Keanu Reeves sing at a high school. This isn't perfect. That's what makes it perfect." But mostly, people were stunned. They didn't know what to make of it. They didn't expect it. They didn't have a category for it. Lily watched it twice, and then shut off her phone. By the time she got to school, the hallway was buzzing. People she barely knew nodded at her. A few students whispered as she walked past. "That's her godfather, right? He probably knew he could sing. Do you think he's really doing the talent show?" In first period, the teacher paused halfway through the lesson to say, "Tell Mr. Reeves we'll save him a front row seat." In second period, someone had printed a blurry still from the video and taped it to the classroom door. It read, "The case naissance has begun." By lunch, it was out of control, and Lily couldn't tell if she was proud or terrified. She skipped the cafeteria and went to the art wing again, sat on the floor under the big mural outside the ceramics room, knees pulled to her chest. She wasn't embarrassed. Not exactly. But this wasn't how she wanted the world to find out. He had been careful, thoughtful, private, and now, without warning, his voice belonged to the internet. She looked up when footsteps approached. Sophia sat down beside her. "You okay?" she asked. Lily gave a tired nod. "I know it's a lot," Sophia said, "but this doesn't change him." Lily didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "He didn't want this." "No," Sophia said, "but he's not running from it either." Lily looked at her. "Is he still going to perform?" Sophia smiled. "He's more sure now than ever." Lily let out a breath. "That's kind of insane. It's also kind of brave." For a while, they just sat together in the quiet. Then Lily stood up. She brushed off her jeans, pulled her hoodie back up, and said, "All right, I guess we better start preparing for the circus." Sophia laughed softly. "That's one way to look at it." Lily didn't laugh back, but for the first time that day, she didn't feel overwhelmed. Because no matter what the internet said, this wasn't about them. It was about a song and a man who chose to sing it anyway. By midweek, the story had reached national news. One morning, Lily walked into the living room to find her mother frozen in front of the television. A morning show was broadcasting a segment titled "From Action Star to Alto, Keanu's High School Serenade." Behind the anchor, a loop played of the same leaked rehearsal clip, now slowed down and edited with exaggerated sound effects. Lily grabbed the remote and turned it off. Vanessa looked over with a sympathetic frown. "They think it's funny." Lily said nothing. She was tired of funny. That afternoon, it got worse. A popular podcast host shared the clip with the caption, "Keanu Reeves singing at a school talent show. Someone please check on this man." Another commentator said, "This is either the most humble thing I've ever seen or the biggest celebrity breakdown since that guy from the vampire movies started doing poetry." The headlines were everywhere. Keanu's next role, high school choir dad, from John Wick to John Denver, career revival or career retreat. They scrolled through it all in a daze. Even Derek got in on it. He posted a photo of Keanu's face edited onto a cartoon body holding a microphone with the caption, "Coming soon to a retirement home near you." His followers laughed, added jokes of their own, and reposted the meme with new captions like, "Keanu drops mixtape, Sad Man edition." Some of the kids at school started humming mock ballads in the hallway. One group passed her in second period and muttered, "Maybe he'll do a Keanu cover of Let It Go." Lily clenched her fists under the desk and bit her tongue. It wasn't fair. They hadn't heard the full song. They hadn't seen the rehearsals. They didn't know what it meant to him or to her. But they acted like it was all a game, a joke. By Thursday, she stopped opening social media. She stopped replying to texts. She walked with her head down and her headphones in, even when the music wasn't playing. Keanu didn't say much at home. He noticed, of course, but he didn't press. Instead, he returned each night to the guest room. He sat by the small window with the original handwritten score open in his lap, a pencil in one hand, a tuning app open on his phone. A quiet rhythm. He marked notes, shifted phrasing, practiced each bar in silence before humming it under his breath. It was meditative, focused, like rebuilding a bridge, one beam at a time. He never asked who was saying what online. He didn't have to. He knew. And he also knew none of it mattered, not compared to the promise he'd made to himself, and to the man who once told him, "Your voice is for those who never had one." That evening, Lily came home late from school. She had stayed behind to help Ava finish a group project, but mostly, she just didn't want to be seen walking through the halls alone. Her locker had been taped over with a piece of paper that read, "Reserved for the talent manager of Keanu Pitchy Reeves." She tore it down without a word. Dinner was quiet. Vanessa made chicken and rice, but only half the plates were touched. Keanu thanked her softly, helped clear the table, then returned to the guest room with a glass of water and the worn envelope under his arm. Lily followed him with her eyes, but didn't speak. After a few minutes, she walked upstairs and closed her door. She collapsed onto her bed and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. She ignored it. She wanted to scream, not at Keanu, but at the noise. The people who didn't know him. The kids who saw the clip and turned it into a punchline. The adults who acted like the only valid performances came with record deals and auto-tune. And Derek, most of all. His smug posts kept gaining likes. Comments filled with laughing emojis, sarcastic encouragement, and guesses about what song Keanu would butcher on talent show night. She buried her face in her pillow. Downstairs, Keanu sat with the sheet music resting on his lap, a small lamp casting soft light over the table. He didn't react to the headlines or the jokes, not publicly, not even privately. He didn't try to explain himself. He just worked. Each phrase of the song felt like returning to a memory, some sweet, some painful, some uncertain. There was a bar in the second verse that Yusuke had once called the fall, a descending vocal line that slipped into a minor key with a rest that left the listener waiting too long for resolution. Most singers hated it. It felt exposed, uncomfortable. Yusuke had made Keanu repeat it 20 times in one session. "This is the moment they'll either believe you," he'd said, "or stop listening." Keanu traced that measure now with a fingertip, then sat at the small keyboard Sophia had lent him for home rehearsal. He sang the line under his breath, marking the breath control. Again, then again. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room in a quiet, certain way. Outside his door, Vanessa paused as she passed by with folded laundry. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. Her eyes softened, and she smiled. Then she kept walking. Upstairs, Lily sat with her light off, music off, everything off. Only one thought stayed on repeat. They don't deserve to hear this. But maybe that was the point. Friday morning, the school loudspeaker crackled during homeroom. Principal Lang's voice came through, steady and composed. I'd like to remind all students that the Ridge Valley Talent Show will be held next Friday evening at the City Auditorium. Rehearsals continue next week. Let's support our performers with respect and encouragement. The announcement was clearly in response to the growing chaos online, but it didn't stop the whispering. In the hallway, Lily overheard one student joke, "I heard Keanu's doing a cover of Baby Shark, but with feeling." Another replied, "Or maybe spoken word poetry about motorcycles." The jokes weren't clever anymore, just loud. During lunch, Derek posted a video from the gym locker room. In it, he sat at a piano app on his phone, fake crying as he banged out off-key notes and whispered, "Only the quiet remain," because everyone else left the auditorium. The video ended with fake applause and a bow. It got 10,000 likes in 2 hours. Lily didn't watch it all the way through. She just stared at the first frame, thumb hovering over the screen, then locked her phone and shoved it into her bag. That evening, she went home early. Keanu was already at the kitchen table when she walked in, quietly studying the score again, humming under his breath. His voice had grown stronger, not polished, not pristine, but grounded. He looked up and saw the look on her face. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but not convincingly. "I saw the new video," he said. Lily winced. "You did?" "I don't go looking, but it found me." She hesitated. "Do you want to say something? A response, maybe?" He shook his head. "No." "Why not?" "He's using your name. He's mocking everything." Keanu folded the sheet music gently and looked at her with calm eyes. "If I respond, I give it weight. If I stay focused, I give the song weight." Lily sat across from him, slumping into the chair. "He's making everyone doubt you." Keanu offered the faintest smile. "They were already laughing. I just gave them something different to laugh at." She looked at him, confused. He leaned forward, voice soft. "Most people are afraid of sincerity. It scares them, because it asks them to feel, and that's harder than joking." Lily didn't reply. She just looked at the sheet music between them. He pushed it slightly toward her. "You've heard it. You know what it is. That's enough." She stared at the title on the page. "Only the quiet remain." Later that night, after Keanu had gone to sleep, Lily went back downstairs. She turned on the light above the table and looked at the score again. This time, she didn't just glance. She read the lines, the rests, the markings in pencil, each one deliberate, each one chosen. She realized something then. This wasn't just a song. It was a memory turned into music, and no meme could undo that. The auditorium was dark again, the only light coming from a single lamp near the piano. It was late, close to 9, and the building had already emptied out. Keanu sat on the edge of the stage, his sheet music resting beside him. He had just finished another run-through, this one slower, more focused. The kind of rehearsal where you're not chasing perfection, but listening for something beneath the notes. Sophia sat in the second row, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Keanu looked up. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why does it matter so much?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up the sheet music, held it loosely in his hands, and stared at the title again. "Only the quiet remain." "It's not about a performance," he said finally. "Not really." Sophia waited. "I spent most of my childhood invisible," he continued. "I wasn't the smartest kid, or the loudest. I didn't play sports. I didn't stand out." She stayed quiet. "I moved around a lot, different cities, different schools. I never really belonged anywhere. I just observed. And when I spoke, it didn't always come out right, so I stopped speaking so much. People assumed I had nothing to say." He paused, breathing through his nose. "I was 13 the first time I sang for someone, and it felt like I had borrowed someone else's voice. Like I wasn't just saying words. I was saying something that had waited years to be heard. Sophia nodded slightly. But I buried it, he said, for years. Because silence became easier than vulnerability. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that silence was strength. She looked at him with new understanding. Why now? She asked. Because I've spent a lifetime watching people try to shout to be seen, and I think the ones who stay quiet need something too. He set the music down beside him. I'm not doing this to prove I can sing. I'm doing it because there's a hallway in every school filled with kids who think no one sees them, no one hears them, no one thinks they matter, unless they're loud, funny, athletic, beautiful, whatever. Sophia leaned back slowly. And this song? She asked. It's for them, he said. For the ones sitting alone at lunch. For the kids who've been through more than they can explain. For the ones who don't know where their place is yet. She blinked, taking that in. Then we're not rehearsing anymore, she said softly. Keanu tilted his head. We're preparing, she said. He gave her a faint smile. She stood, walked back to the piano, and opened a new folder. Your voice isn't perfect, she said, but it's real. So let's make the arrangement match that. Sophia pulled out a pencil and began making marks across the sheet music. She lowered a few of the high notes, adjusted the dynamics, and added longer pauses between verses. This part here, she said, pointing to a section of the second verse, will let you breathe a little longer. Don't rush it. Let the stillness speak. Keanu nodded. She moved to the bridge. And this? This isn't a climax. It's a confession, so don't push it. Just let it fall out of you. He watched her reshape the arrangement line by line. She wasn't changing the song. She was uncovering it, letting it match the voice he had now, not the one from years ago, not the voice that once filled Yusuke's studio, but the one scarred by time, softened by loss, made human by everything in between. When she was done, she handed him the new sheet. It's yours now, she said. Let's make sure it sounds like it. Keanu took it in both hands. The paper felt heavier than it looked. They began rehearsing again, now with the revised version. He sang slower, more deliberately, careful to follow the changes, but the more he leaned into them, the more natural it became. The rasp in his voice wasn't a flaw anymore. It was part of the story. Sophia played gently, only guiding him when needed. Her touch on the piano was light, steady. She didn't overpower him. She let the melody come from him. By the second run-through, he started to forget about the outside world. He forgot the headlines. He forgot the memes. He forgot the cameras that might be waiting next week. There was only the music, the words, and the intention behind them. As he reached the final verse, his voice cracked slightly. But he didn't stop. Sophia didn't correct him. She let the note ring out, flawed but real. When the final chord settled, she looked at him with a kind of quiet reverence. That, she said, is what they won't expect. He exhaled, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. I still don't know if it's enough, he admitted. It is, she said, because it's honest. They didn't rehearse again that night. Instead, they sat together on the stage steps. The auditorium was still empty, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like something was taking root. Sophia closed the piano lid. You ever think about recording it? She asked. Keanu shook his head. It's not meant to be captured. She nodded. Just witnessed. He looked at her. Exactly. Outside, the wind shifted through the trees. Inside, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it belonged. The next morning, Sophia emailed the final arrangement to herself, saved it twice, and printed a clean copy. She slipped it into a new folder labeled with just one word, show. The title wasn't written in bold or italics, just handwritten at the top of the page. Only the quiet remain. She handed it to Keanu before their final rehearsal that weekend. He looked at the folder, then opened it slowly. The pages were pristine. No smudges, no tears. Everything aligned, every pause felt intentional. This wasn't a song anymore, it was a message dressed as music. Keanu placed it on the stand. "Thank you." Sophia smiled. "You did the hard part." They ran it through once more. The auditorium was still empty, but now Keanu sang like it wasn't. His voice wasn't perfect. There were still imperfections in the tone, the phrasing. But something had shifted. It was all there now. The grief, the memory, the quiet hope buried under the lyrics. After the last note, Sophia didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Keanu stood silently, staring at the keys. Then he turned to her. "What if they don't get it?" And conscript said. He blinked. "Not all of them," she clarified. "But someone will. One person. One kid sitting in the back row thinking no one sees them. They'll get it. That's who you're singing for." He looked down, then nodded once. Lily entered the auditorium just before sunset. She didn't announce herself. She took a seat in the second row, waited until they were done rehearsing, then slowly stood and walked up the center aisle. Keanu noticed her first, then Sophia. Lily stepped onto the stage and picked up the folder. "This is the version?" she asked. Sophia nodded. Lily flipped to the final page. Her eyes scanned the last verse, the closing measures, the penciled-in breaths. "It's better," she said. Keanu gave a small smile. Sophia reworked it. Lily handed the folder back. "You sound different when you sing it now." He looked at her. "You sound like you mean it," she said. Keanu held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said, "I do." Lily nodded. "Then let them listen." She turned to leave, then paused. "Whatever happens next week, just know I'm proud of you." It caught him off guard, but he didn't show it. "Thanks, kid," he said softly. After she left, Sophia closed the piano. "You ready?" she asked. Keanu didn't answer right away. He just looked out across the empty rows. "I think I've been ready for years," he said. And this time, he meant it. By Monday morning, the buzz surrounding Keanu's performance had grown louder than anyone expected. What started as a school talent show clip had become a cultural moment. It had passed through talk shows, social media, and online forums. Now it was reaching television news cycles and celebrity gossip sites. That afternoon, Vanessa opened the mailbox and found a sleek black envelope addressed to Mr. Reeves, care of Ridge Valley High School. The sender was listed in small silver font. Midnight Circle Studios, the production arm behind one of the most watched late-night shows in the country. She walked inside and handed it to Keanu, who was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing the final, marked-up version of the score. "You got invited to talk about the show," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Not this one," she added. "The other one, the national one." He opened the envelope and skimmed the card inside. It was brief, polished, full of praise. The host wanted to explore the deeper artistic journey and celebrate your courage in surprising the world. They promised the interview would be sensitive, respectful, and not about promotion but legacy. Keanu closed the card and set it down. "You going to respond?" Vanessa asked. He nodded. "Yeah." "And?" "I'm going to say no." She leaned against the counter, curious. "Just like that?" Keanu looked up at her. "It's not a performance." Vanessa waited. "It's a return," he said, "and I don't want to explain it to a room full of people who already think they understand it." That night, he sent a quiet, polite email through his agent. "Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored, but I'd prefer to let the music speak." The next morning, the host mentioned the decline on air. With a smile, he said, "We tried, but Mr. Reeves is a hard man to schedule." The audience laughed. No one knew the full story, and Keanu was fine with that. Meanwhile, back in Ridge Valley, the school was facing a problem no one had anticipated. The auditorium couldn't hold them all. Calls had started flooding in after the leaked video went viral. Parents, former students, local press, fans, and even a few talent scouts had contacted the main office asking for tickets. Some offered donations to the school just for a seat. Others claimed they had relatives in the building, anything to get inside. The school's auditorium had a capacity of 300. They were expecting double that. Principal Morris sat in her office, surrounded by voicemail transcripts and half-drunk coffee cups. The phone on her desk buzzed constantly, and her inbox had reached unread levels that made her wince. By Tuesday afternoon, the school board had stepped in. They proposed moving the show to the Ridge Valley Civic Center, a city-owned auditorium downtown with seating for nearly 1,000. It was used mostly for orchestra concerts and holiday pageants, not school events. Principal Morris was hesitant. It would mean more logistics, more risk, more eyes. And one big question: would Keanu still do it? She made the call that evening, pacing slowly through her living room while Keanu sat at the kitchen counter, scribbling phrasy reminders onto a fresh copy of the sheet music. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "I wanted to give you a heads up. We've decided to move the event to the Civic Center." He looked up, calm. "Okay. There's going to be press there, possibly even national coverage." "Okay." She paused. "We can understand if that changes things for you." He set down his pencil. "It doesn't," he said. Principal Morris exhaled in relief, though he couldn't hear it. "I'll be there," Keanu added. "Thank you," she said softly. After they hung up, he picked up the pencil again and kept marking his notes. He wasn't thinking about who would be in the audience. He was thinking about the rest between verse 2 and 3. Whether he should hold it for 2 beats or 3. Whether the lift into the bridge should happen gradually or all at once. Vanessa came in from the porch and raised an eyebrow. "Still on?" Keanu nodded. "New venue. Bigger." She smirked. "That scare you?" "No," he said. "The silence after the last note, that scares me." She tilted her head. "Because it might be quiet? Because it might not." He didn't explain. He didn't have to. That night, Sophia texted to confirm rehearsal time. He replied with a simple, "Yes." At the bottom of the message, she had added one line. "They're not coming to hear a voice, they're coming to feel something." He stared at that message for a long time before turning off his phone. He didn't need to be reminded. He already knew. The next day, posters around school were updated with new details. Talent show, one night only, now at Ridge Valley Civic Center. The change spread fast. Students buzzed in the halls, teachers adjusted their plans, and the custodial staff at the Civic Center began preparing the space for the unexpected crowd. Lily walked past the new poster on the way to class and felt her stomach twist. It was real now. No more gymnasium, no more parents with folding chairs, no more home court anonymity. This was a full auditorium with cameras, lights, and a public stage. A stage where her godfather would stand alone and sing a song no one had heard before. A song that meant everything. In art class, Ava leaned over and whispered, "Is he really still doing it?" Lily nodded once. Ava gave her a wide-eyed look. "He's crazy, but kind of inspiring." Lily didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That afternoon, as Keanu and Sophia rehearsed one last time in the school auditorium, the tone was different. Focused. Final. He had stopped needing instruction. Now, Sophia was there only to support. She gave light feedback, minor reminders, subtle cues, but mostly she let him move through the piece uninterrupted. When he reached the end, they both sat in silence for a while. Then she asked, "What are you going to do when it's over?" Keanu leaned back, thinking. "Probably go back to filming." "No, I mean after the song, after that silence." He looked at her. "I don't know. Maybe I'll bow. Maybe I'll just leave." She smiled. "You'll know what to do." He nodded. That night, Lily came downstairs and found Keanu in the living room, folding the new suit Vanessa had helped him pick out for the show. He laid it gently across the back of the couch, checking the collar, the seams. "Do you need anything?" she asked. He looked over. "Just quiet." She walked in and sat on the floor beside the couch. "I didn't want this to become what it became," she said. "The press, the jokes, all of it. I know. I was scared they'd turn you into something you're not." He nodded. "But they didn't," she added. Keanu looked down at her. "No. The LA turned into something else instead," she said. "Listeners." He blinked, letting that sink in. "Not all of them," she admitted, "but enough." Keanu gave a small, quiet smile. Vanessa stepped into the doorway. "You're going to be great." He looked at both of them. "I'm not aiming for great," he said. "Just true." Vanessa nodded. "Then you'll be both." The house fell into silence again, but this time it felt full, not empty. Outside, the wind shifted through the trees. Inside, the suit waited. And in Keanu's mind, the song was already playing, note by note, breath by breath. The audience was coming, but he wasn't singing for them. He was singing for the ones who never got the mic. The city auditorium had never looked like this. Rows of seats stretched to the back wall, nearly every one filled. The lights above the stage glowed warm and steady, casting long shadows along the polished floor. Ushers in Ridge Valley High polos handed out printed programs at the door, trying to smile as they shuffled between waves of parents, teachers, and strangers from out of town. Reporters stood at the back with notepads and smartphones. A local news van parked outside, its satellite dish angled to catch the signal. Students who had never cared about talent shows before now leaned forward in their seats, phones ready, whispers flying. Lily sat with Vanessa in the second row, hands gripping the edge of her seat. Her stomach twisted, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of it all. This wasn't just a school show anymore, it'd become something else. Backstage, Keanu stood in the far corner near the curtain, his back resting lightly against the wall. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no tie, and held a manila folder in his hands. Inside was the original handwritten score, creased, fragile, and annotated with small pencil markings that had followed him since boyhood. Sophia stood nearby, headset on, clipboard pressed to her chest. She glanced at him and then at the stage entrance. Marie moved Derek to go first. She said quietly, "They wanted something energetic to open with." Keanu raised one eyebrow. Sophia half smiled. "He's doing a card trick, and maybe a disappearing act, if we're lucky." Keanu gave the faintest nod. "Seems appropriate." She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "They won't expect what you're about to do." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm not sure I expect it either," but there was no fear in his tone, just steadiness. Sophia looked at the folder in his hands. "You're bringing that out with you?" Keanu nodded. "It belongs there." A voice echoed over the intercom backstage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your first performer of the evening, Derek Walsh." A burst of applause followed. Then Derek's voice boomed from the stage. "What's up, Ridge Valley?" he shouted, amplified and eager. "Hope you're ready for a little magic." Keanu stepped slightly to the side, just far enough to see through the crack in the curtain. Derek wore a sequined vest and held a deck of oversized cards. The crowd chuckled at his exaggerated gestures. Flash paper flared in his hands. A puff of smoke covered a disappearing coin. It was loud, fast, distracting, and entirely expected. Backstage, Sophia checked her clipboard, then looked at Keanu again. "You okay?" He breathed out slowly. "I'm ready." She nodded. "Good, because you're up next." He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just adjusted the folder in his hands and turned toward the edge of the stage. Derek's final trick involved a foam rabbit, a paper bag, and a lot of fake applause. When he bowed, deep, theatrical, and clearly satisfied with himself, the audience gave him a polite round of claps. A few students cheered more out of obligation than enthusiasm. He waved one last time, winked toward the crowd, and jogged off stage. As he passed Keanu behind the curtain, he smirked. "Top that," he muttered. Keanu didn't respond. He didn't even look at him. Derek moved on, shoulders bouncing, still caught in his own spotlight. Sophia stepped forward, headset pressed to her ear, then leaned in. "They're ready for you," she said. Keanu looked down at the folder once more. He ran his fingers gently along the creased edges of the handwritten score. It was the same copy Yusuke had handed him so many years ago. The same notes, the same spaces. A song written for a boy who had no voice, and kept by a man who no longer needed one to prove his worth. He didn't rehearse the first line in his head. He didn't hum the melody under his breath. He just breathed. Then he stepped onto the stage. The lights hit him immediately, bright, warm, almost too much. The sudden visibility of it all felt like stepping into another world. 1,000 eyes watched him in real time. The hush that followed his entrance wasn't uncertain. It was expectant. Phones were raised. Faces leaned forward. Somewhere in the second row, Lily held her breath. Keanu walked across the stage with quiet, deliberate steps. He placed the folder carefully on the music stand of the upright piano. The bench waited for him. He sat. No introduction, no preamble, just him, the piano, and the silence. For a moment, he looked at the keys. Then he opened the folder. The lights softened just slightly, and the room seemed to lean in. His hands found their place. He rested his fingers gently on the keyboard and waited. The pause wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. He let the quiet settle like dust around him, soft, patient, full of permission. Then he played the first note. It rang out, alone, clear, low, barely louder than breath, and then another. A slow melody took shape, unhurried, not demanding attention, simply asking to be heard. He began to sing. The first line was delicate, almost spoken. His voice was deeper than the original arrangement required, more textured. But that was the beauty of it. He didn't try to sound younger. He didn't try to impress. He sang exactly as he was, cracked and steady, a man returning to something sacred. The official phone rang. The room remained silent, almost reverent. Not even the shuffle of feet or the rustle of programs. Just the sound of his voice against the simple piano accompaniment, moving slowly through the verses. Each note felt personal, not rehearsed, but remembered. In the third line, his voice cracked ever so slightly, but he didn't flinch. He stayed inside the moment, letting it be part of the message. Sophia, standing in the wings, exhaled quietly. She'd told him that line was a confession, not a climax. And that's how he sang it, gently, truthfully. Halfway through the piece, something shifted in the audience. The phones lowered. The fidgeting stopped. Even the press at the back leaned forward, notebooks forgotten in their laps. Because what was happening on that stage didn't feel like a performance anymore. It felt like witnessing someone remember who they were, and who they had once tried not to be. Lily gripped the arms of her seat. She wasn't thinking about the posts, the comments, the memes. None of that mattered now. Because the man singing in front of them wasn't the movie star, the celebrity, or even her godfather. He was just a man singing a song for the people who had never had one. The final verse arrived. The melody descended, softer than before, barely held together by breath. Keanu's hands moved with calm precision across the piano, guiding the final chords with the care of someone laying something down for the last time. Then the music stopped, but he didn't move. He let the silence have its space. 1 second, 2, 3. Stillness. Then he stood. He didn't bow. He didn't speak. He just looked out at the audience, gave a quiet nod, and stepped away from the piano. A beat passed. then another. Then, from the back of the room, someone stood and clapped once, hard and honest. Others followed, first in scattered waves, then in full. It wasn't thunderous. It was something better. It was sincere. A standing ovation rose across the Civic Center, not because of fame, not because of expectation, but because something in the room had shifted. Something had been offered, and they had received it. Backstage, Sophia met him as he stepped off the platform. She didn't say anything at first. She had just reached out and squeezed his shoulder. Keanu looked at her. "Bailey heard it," he said. Sophia nodded. "I told you they would." He looked down at the folder in his hands. Still closed, especially the still hole. Willie ran to him a moment later, eyes glassy, arms thrown around his chest. "That wasn't embarrassing," she whispered. "That was beautiful." He held her for a long moment, then smiled quietly. "It was never about me," he said, and in her heart she finally understood. The stage lights dimmed as the MC stepped aside. No introduction, no video montage, no spotlight announcement, just a pause long enough for the room to settle. Then Keanu walked on stage. He didn't rush, he didn't wave. He simply entered the light and moved toward the piano with the same calm steps he had rehearsed in silence 100 times. In one hand, he carried the worn folder. In the other, nothing at all. There was no background music, no prelude, just stillness, stretched thin across 1,000 held breaths. He sat at the piano, centered the bench, and placed the folder on the music stand. The original handwritten score, creases, pencil marks and all, lay open in front of him. He lowered his head, rested his fingers lightly on the keys, and waited. No one in the audience moved. No one dared speak. He played the first note. It rang out alone. Not loud, not bold, but enough. The second note followed, then the third, each one chosen with care, as if the weight of every sound mattered. He opened his mouth and began to sing. The first line came shaky, not because of nerves, but because of memory. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from everything the song carried. Every line etched with years of silence, every word shaped by grief that had aged into understanding. He sang not to show talent, but to speak truth. His voice found strength in the second verse. It wasn't polished, it wasn't trained, but it was real. Each note hovered just long enough to linger, then dissolved like smoke. The audience didn't fidget. They didn't cough or shift in their chairs. They listened. Even those who had come expecting a joke, a gimmick, or a viral moment stopped waiting for something else, because something else was already happening. The lights on stage didn't move. The spotlight didn't widen. There were no background singers, no projections, no color shifts. Only the song, simple, unfolding. Keanu's hands moved over the keys, now more confident, but never showy. He wasn't performing. He was remembering, publicly. The boy in Mr. Arata's studio, the pain he buried for decades, the voice he left behind. It was all there, woven into every measure. By the third verse, he had settled into the melody. His breath lined up with the music. The rasp in his voice became its own kind of rhythm. And the silence between phrases? It said more than most songs ever do. Sophia stood in the wings, hands clasped. Lily sat motionless in her seat, her eyes locked on the stage. Even the reporters at the back stopped filming. Phones lowered. Not from policy, but out of respect. Because this wasn't a performance anymore. It was a moment no one wanted to interrupt. And no one would ever forget. The bridge arrived with a shift in tone. The chords deepened. The melody stretched out. Keanu's voice dropped slightly into his lower register, the kind of depth that didn't ask for attention but commanded it anyway. There was weariness in the notes, but also strength. The kind that comes from someone who's walked through something and doesn't need to explain it. Each word felt like a memory, spoken aloud for the first time. The original composition hadn't been written for a crowd. It had been written for healing. Keanu never changed that intention. Not during rehearsals, not for the stage. He didn't amplify anything. He didn't edit his delivery to please the room. He just sang the song the way it had always lived inside him. By now, the entire auditorium had gone still. Not frozen, listening. Even Derek, who had returned to the wings with a grin still stuck to his face, had gone quiet. He stood just beyond the curtain, arms crossed, eyes slightly narrowed, and though he wouldn't admit it out loud, something in him shifted too. On stage, Keanu reached the line that Yusuke once called the song's heartbeat, a lyrical moment that held no metaphor, no clever turn, just honesty. The room didn't move as he delivered it. It wasn't loud. It didn't swell. It just arrived. And when it did, a few people in the audience exhaled, like they had been holding their breath without realizing. Sophia watched with her hand pressed against her chest, eyes shining. She had heard this version dozens of times in rehearsal, but not like this. Here, under the lights, something in Keanu had opened fully. There was no protective layer, no actor between the man and the music. He wasn't shielding the cracks in his voice. He wasn't adjusting the tone to avoid the imperfections. He was using them. Each pause held the weight of a choice. Each falter reminded the audience that vulnerability was not weakness. It was invitation. The final chorus came softly. No crescendo, no dramatic peak. Just a slow return to the quiet from where the song began. Keanu's hands lingered on the last chord. He didn't release it right away. He let it ring out, gently fading into silence, like the closing breath of a prayer. Then he let go. The room didn't erupt, not yet. It simply existed in stillness. Every person in the audience knew they had witnessed something rare, something that didn't need explanation or applause to be valuable. The air felt charged, but calm. Keanu sat there for one more moment. Then he stood. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He closed the folder, held it in both hands, and stepped away from the piano. The song had spoken, and now silence would finish the conversation. Keanu walked slowly toward the side of the stage, the original sheet music tucked beneath his arm. The lights didn't follow him. They stayed centered on the empty piano, where the final note still seemed to echo in the mind long after it had faded from the air. Then someone stood, a single person near the back of the auditorium. They clapped once, then again. Others joined in, softly at first, then louder, row by row. It was not explosive, it was not dramatic, it was respectful, earned. One by one, people rose to their feet. No one cheered, no one whistled. It wasn't that kind of performance. This wasn't celebration, it was reverence. A thank you for something fragile that had been trusted to them. Sophia moved toward the edge of the curtain but didn't go out. She knew this was Keanu's moment, not to bask in it, but to release it. He remained just off stage, hands by his sides, breathing evenly, his head slightly bowed. Lily stood too, her eyes full, her hands together. She didn't clap right away. She just watched him, and she saw it. The way his shoulders eased, the way his expression didn't shift into a grin or a look of relief. He wasn't seeking approval. He hadn't been from the beginning. He had delivered something, and it had landed. Sophia stepped beside him now, just outside the view of the audience. "You did it," she whispered. He didn't reply. She didn't need him to. Outside the building, people were already gathering by the doors, calling friends, typing messages, filming short recaps, even as the next performer stepped on stage. But none of it could recreate what had just happened. It wasn't made for replay, it was made for presence. Back in the auditorium, the applause slowly faded, not because people lost interest, but because silence once again felt like the only honest way to close the moment. The next act, a duet of two seniors singing a pop ballad, took the stage with forced smiles and a shaky guitar. They were good, nervous, trying, but the room was still carrying something. Keanu stood backstage, the folder still in his hand, and looked at the piano from behind the curtain. He didn't feel like the same person who had walked out 20 minutes earlier. He felt clearer, not lighter, not healed, but clearer, like something long buried had been placed gently where it belonged. Lily joined him a few minutes later. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood beside him, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater. Then, softly, she said, "I think he would have been proud." Keanu looked down at the folder. "Who was always proud," he said. They turned and walked slowly down the hallway toward the green room, the quiet growing behind them. Not empty, not hollow, just quiet, exactly the way it was meant to be. The rest of the talent show moved forward, but it was as if the rhythm had changed. Acts that followed were met with polite attention, but the auditorium remained hushed in a different way. Something in the space had settled. Not heavy, not cold, just grounded. Keanu remained backstage. He didn't return to the wings or peek at the audience. He sat quietly on a folding chair in the green room, the original score resting on his lap. His fingers traced the edge of the folder. He wasn't rehearsing now. He wasn't reflecting. He was just being still. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He could hear faint applause for the next performers, a round of laughter at a comedy act, the squeal of a microphone being adjusted. He didn't stand. He waited. Outside the green room door, Sophia stood with her headset tilted off one ear. She checked the program and looked toward the stage. The last act was being introduced, a dance group from the senior class. Bright lights, matching outfits, loud music. It would end the night with energy, which was what the school hoped for. But she could feel it. No matter how strong the final act was, the show had already peaked. Not because of stardom, not because of spectacle, because something real had taken place. Lily pushed open the door to the green room without knocking. Keanu looked up, and in that moment, everything on her face said more than any words could. She crossed the room and threw her arms around him. He didn't hesitate. He hugged her tightly. For a long moment, neither said anything. Then she whispered, "That wasn't embarrassing." He smiled gently. "No." She shook her head. "That was beautiful." Keanu breathed in slowly and held her for another second before releasing her. She sat down beside him, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. "I think some of the kids who laughed, I think even they didn't know what to do," she said. "They just stood there, like something hit them and they didn't expect it." He nodded. "That's the point," he said. "It wasn't for them to cheer. It was for them to feel." She looked at him. "Did you?" "Yes," he said softly. A beat passed. Then Lily added, "You sounded different." Keanu tilted his head. "Not like a singer," she said. "Like someone who finally said something they'd been holding in for too long." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Outside the green room, applause echoed again. The final act was finishing. The show was ending. But in this quiet space, time moved differently. Slower, truer. Keanu folded the score, tucked it back in the folder, and leaned against the wall. He had nothing more to prepare. The silence he had carried for so long had finally been shared. As the final act wrapped up, the house lights brightened and the MC stepped forward with a wide grin, clearly relieved the show had gone off without incident. She thanked the performers, the teachers, the volunteers. Applause rose and fell as she spoke, the kind of enthusiastic rhythm that usually signaled the end of a community event. But underneath it, there was still something lingering, a kind of hum in the crowd that hadn't been there before, something unspoken. As people gathered their coats and turned to leave, they didn't rush. Many lingered by the aisles, still whispering about Keanu's song. Some hadn't even known his name until that night. Others had come out of curiosity, expecting to see a spectacle or a stumble. What they witnessed instead was something different. No one could agree exactly what it was, but they all knew it mattered. In the lobby, a small group of students stood near the windows, not taking selfies or joking like they usually would. They just stood there, replaying what they'd seen. "That didn't feel like a celebrity thing," one of them said. Another nodded. It felt personal. Backstage, Principal Morris was speaking quietly with Sophia, both of them marveling at how smooth the evening had gone, considering the press and the nerves. But even Principal Morris, who had expected media management and maybe even damage control, looked strangely moved. "Yes, I thought he might leave early," she said. Sophia smiled. "He's still here." How didn't want the spotlight, did he? "No," Sophia replied. "He wanted the silence." At that moment, Keanu emerged quietly from the green room, Lily walking beside him. He had changed out of his jacket, but still held the folder tucked under his arm. They didn't head for the exit. They didn't move toward any cameras. They just walked slowly down the back hallway toward the side entrance, where staff usually came in and out. Vanessa was waiting for them in the car outside. As they stepped into the cool night air, Keanu paused for a moment and looked up at the sky. No cameras flashed, no lights followed, just stars and quiet. Lily glanced over. "How do you feel now?" He thought for a long second before answering. "Like something finally landed," he said. "Like I stopped carrying it." They walked toward the car, unhurried. The crowd was still buzzing behind them, but they didn't look back. Inside the car, Vanessa gave him a nod through the rearview mirror. "Proud of you," she said. Keanu didn't respond right away. Then he smiled, quietly. "Thanks for driving," he said. Vanessa chuckled, easing the car into gear. Behind them, the auditorium doors closed. The show was over. But for Keanu, something had just begun. The drive home was quiet. Not because anyone asked it to be, but because the silence felt earned. Vanessa kept her eyes on the road. Lily leaned against the window in the back seat, eyes half closed, not tired, just full. Keanu sat beside her, the score resting in his lap, his thumb lightly brushing the edge of the folder as the trees flicked by. They passed through the center of Ridge Valley, where the small-town lights glowed soft and steady. On any other night it would have felt ordinary, but tonight, even the familiar roads felt different, like something had shifted beneath the surface. When they pulled into the driveway, no one moved right away. Vanessa turned off the engine but left the keys in the ignition. She looked over her shoulder. "I made tea earlier," she said. "Might still be warm." Lily nodded. "I'll get the cups." They moved slowly into the house. No rush, no ceremony, just the quiet comfort of coming home after something important has happened. Keanu set the folder on the kitchen table. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Every note, every pause, every breath was still alive in him. Not as pressure, but peace. Lily placed 3 mugs on the table and sat down. Vanessa poured the tea and joined them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lily looked up. "What are you going to do with it now?" she asked, gesturing toward the folder. Keanu considered the question. "I don't know." "You're not going to post it? Or release it?" "No." "Why not?" He looked at her. "Because it wasn't meant to be shared like that. Not digitized, not monetized. It happened. That's enough." Lily nodded slowly. Vanessa smiled. Sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones that stay small. Keanu sipped his tea and looked down at the folder one last time. He thought about Yusuke, about that little studio with the cracked floorboards and the faded photograph in the corner, about the first time he ever sang that song, about how it felt to carry it in silence for so many years. And then he thought about tonight. The lights, the stillness, the way the room stopped breathing for just a moment, and how that breath never quite returned the same. He didn't need a recording. He had lived it. And more importantly, he had let it go. Across the table, Lily reached forward and tapped the cover of the folder. "You know," she said quietly, "I think you gave people more than just a song tonight." He met her eyes. "Maybe." "No," she said. "You reminded them what listening feels like." Keanu smiled. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, they sat a little longer around the table, not trying to make the night last, just letting it finish naturally. And when they rose to turn out the lights, no one looked back at the folder. It had done its part. Now the silence would carry it the rest of the way. It started with a shaky video taken from the fourth row. Someone had forgotten to silence their phone and caught the entire performance from a low angle, the camera jittery, but the audio surprisingly clear. Keanu's voice rang through the speakers, quiet, vulnerable, unmistakably real. The final verse faded into a long, reverent silence, and the person filming never moved the lens. That clip was posted to a small student-run account at Ridge Valley High. It wasn't captioned with clickbait or hashtags, just 6 words. "He really did it. He sang." Within hours, it had 100,000 views. By morning, it had crossed 1 million. Then came the reposts, fan pages, music channels, news sites. The comments ranged from stunned admiration to disbelief. Keanu Reeves sings? No backup, no auto-tune, just raw. This is what courage sounds like. The headlines followed close behind. They appeared across timelines and screens, printed in black and white, and shouted in digital neon. Keanu sings the song he never meant to share. The performance that broke the internet without saying a word. From John Wick to gentle hymns, a voice we didn't know we needed. Some were dramatic, some poetic. Some tried to analyze it. Others just let the video speak for itself. Talk shows played it in fragments, looping the final line again and again. One host choked up mid-commentary and had to cut to commercial. Another compared it to the final scenes of a forgotten film, where the silence tells the story no words can. But through it all, Keanu said nothing. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't clarify his intentions. He didn't give an interview. He just let the world wonder. Sophia, however, was harder to keep out of the spotlight. By midweek, she had received emails from 5 different arts organizations. One was a non-profit that specialized in healing through music. Another offered her a position, directing a new program for underserved youth. She sat at her small kitchen table, reading through the messages with wide eyes, unsure of how to process it all. When she called Keanu to tell him, his response was simple. "Good. You deserve it." "But I didn't do anything," she said. "You listened," he replied. "That's more than most." At the school, students who had once joked about the talent show now whispered in the halls with a different kind of energy. Some admitted they'd rewatched the clip 5, 6, even 10 times. Others confessed they hadn't expected to feel anything, but had cried anyway. Derek, who had once posted mocking memes, took his down quietly. He didn't say why. Lily noticed. She didn't say anything to him, but they locked eyes once in the hallway. He gave her a small nod. She returned it. Nothing more was needed. Outside of Ridge Valley, articles and essays popped up across blogs and magazines. One music critic wrote, "It wasn't that the voice was flawless. It was that the moment didn't ask for perfection. It asked for truth." Another said, "He gave the kind of performance you don't want to share, but have to." And the world listened. By the end of the week, the clip had surpassed 30 million views across platforms. Some users slowed it down and analyzed each lyric, Others added subtitles, translations, overlays. A few posted response videos, faces tear-streaked, simply saying, "I didn't know I needed this." Musicians weighed in. A jazz pianist from New York called it one of the most emotionally honest performances I've ever seen. A Grammy-winning producer tweeted, "No polish, no filter, just truth. That's the real art." A rising indie singer shared it with a caption that read, "For every kid who ever felt invisible, this one's for you." But Keanu still said nothing. No follow-up, no repost, no thank you for the support. Instead, he returned to his normal life. No one could figure out why that made it even more powerful. Sofia received a request from a major podcast asking for an exclusive interview. She turned it down. When asked why, she said, "The performance said everything. There's nothing to add." One of her students brought her a folded piece of paper after class. Inside was a drawing, just a sketch of a piano, with the words, "Thank you for making room for quiet people." She kept it in her planner next to her schedule. Lily, meanwhile, started getting messages too, some from classmates, some from strangers, people asking what the song was called, who wrote it, why no one could find a recorded version. One message simply said, "You're lucky to have someone like him in your life." She didn't reply to all of them, but she read every word. She noticed a shift in the school too. It wasn't loud. It was subtle, but real. Students who used to stay quiet during morning announcements suddenly signed up for open mic night. A freshman who rarely spoke in class shared a short poem in English. Another student asked to start a quiet creators club for anyone who preferred listening over leading. The world hadn't just reacted to the video. It had responded to what it represented. Something small, something true, something gentle in a world that rarely rewards gentleness. On Friday evening, Keanu walked into the school alone. He went to the auditorium, not for a show or a rehearsal, but just to sit. The lights were off. The seats were empty. But the piano was still there. He stood near it for a long time, not touching it, just breathing in the silence. Then he pulled a small envelope from his jacket. Inside was a copy of the sheet music, not the original, just a new print, clean and simple. He placed it gently on the piano and walked away. No one saw him leave. No one filmed it. But the next morning, when the janitor unlocked the doors, he found the score resting upright on the stand. Above the title, a note was written in small cursive, "For the next quiet one, when they're ready." And beneath it, in the soft pencil stroke of someone who understood silence, "Only the quiet remain." It arrived quietly, in a small, padded envelope with an international postmark. The handwriting was elegant and precise. The return address listed a name Keanu hadn't seen in decades. Arata. He stood at the kitchen counter, holding the package without opening it, his thumb running along the edge of the seal. Vanessa had left it on the mail tray earlier that morning, thinking it was just another piece of fan mail forwarded through the school. But Keanu knew it wasn't. He sat down at the table and opened it slowly. Inside was a folded letter, a worn black and white photograph, and a single sheet of rice paper wrapped around a smaller envelope. The scent that rose from the paper was faint, something old and clean, like cedar and rain. He unfolded the letter first. It was written in English, the words graceful and careful, as if the writer had chosen each one not just for meaning but for tone. "Dear Mr. Reeves, you may not remember me. I am Kaori, Yusuke Orata's niece. I was a child when you came to visit his studio. I remember hiding behind the curtain and listening to you sing while he tapped the rhythm with his pencil. You never saw me, but I remember. My uncle passed away many years ago, as you know, but he left something behind for you. It took me a long time to find where to send it. Then last week, I saw a video, a song, a room full of silence, and a voice that reminded me of something I thought I had forgotten. Thank you for carrying his song. Keanu paused, then opened the envelope wrapped in rice paper. Inside was another folded page, older, yellowed with time. The handwriting was Yusuke's. To Keanu, "If this finds you, it means you kept the music longer than I expected. That alone tells me everything I need to know. There are many ways to scream. Some do it with fists, some with silence, some with laughter. But music? Music is breath for those who cannot scream at all. You had that breath once. I worried the world would teach you to hold it. But if you are reading this, maybe you finally let it out. You never needed to impress anyone. You only needed to feel and let others feel with you. That is the gift. That is the voice. You gave it to them, Keanu, and that means you never lost it. Be well, wherever this reaches you. Arata." Keanu set the letter down slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. Just sat in the quiet, letting the words fold around him like a blanket pulled from memory. Then he picked up the photograph. It showed a teenage Keanu standing beside Yusuke in front of the piano. Yusuke's hand rested on Keanu's shoulder, mid-laugh, the kind of unguarded moment no one poses for. He hadn't even known the photo existed. Lily came home that afternoon to find Keanu still sitting at the table, the letter spread out in front of him, the photo resting beside his tea. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable but calm. She approached slowly. "You okay?" He nodded, then gestured to the envelope. "This came today." She picked up the photo first, her eyes widened. "That's you?" He gave a soft smile. "Apparently. Who's the man?" "Yusuke Arata," he said. "The one who taught me the song." She sat down beside him, carefully turning the photo toward the light. "You look different," she said. It was different. She studied the man next to young Keanu. Yusuke had deep eyes, a calm presence even in the photograph. His hand on Keanu's shoulder said more than 100 compliments. Lily reached for the letter next. She read it slowly, reverently, one line at a time. When she got to the final words, she paused, then whispered, "He really believed in you." Keanu's voice was quiet. He believed in music, and that sometimes it chooses unlikely messengers. Lily looked at him. "Do you think he saw this coming?" He shook his head. "No, but I think he hoped." She traced the edge of the photograph with her finger. "Do you want to keep this somewhere special?" Keanu looked at her. "Would you frame it?" he asked. She blinked, surprised. "Me?" He nodded. "I trust your eye more than mine." A smile broke across her face. "I know exactly where it should go." She took the photo carefully in both hands and carried it upstairs. Later that night, she came back down with the finished frame. A simple wooden border, matte black, no decoration. She had chosen a subtle linen background, pale gray, that made the image float just slightly. She handed it to him. "I didn't want it to feel polished," she said. "Just honest." He studied it for a long moment. "It's perfect." She placed it on the mantel above the fireplace, between an old candle and a small ceramic bowl Vanessa had made in a pottery class years ago. They all stood there together for a minute, Keanu, Lily, and Vanessa, looking at the photograph like it was more than a memory. He was proof, not just of who he had been, but who had seen him before he saw himself. The next morning, Keanu wrote a short letter in return to Kaori. He thanked her for the photo. He thanked her for the words. And he told her what she likely already knew, that the song had been sung. She replied a week later with a single sentence. He would have listened to the silence, too. Keanu folded that message and slipped it into the back of the framed photo. Not for display, but for safekeeping. Some things weren't meant for the world, just for those who understand what music really is. For a breath, a pause, a truth too big for words. Keanu never intended to build something. He thought the performance would speak, the silence would settle, and the moment would pass quietly, the way all honest moments do. But the world didn't let it go. Letters poured in, some from students, others from parents, teachers, former musicians, even strangers who had stopped singing or writing or dreaming decades ago. They wrote not to flatter, but to share. They told him about their childhood choirs, the journals they hid under mattresses, the songs they never sang aloud. One woman simply wrote, "Thank you for giving my son permission to feel small and strong at the same time." Keanu read them all. And one night, sitting at the kitchen table long after Lily and Vanessa had gone to bed, he turned to a blank page in his notebook and wrote a question at the top. What if the song didn't end with the last note? Below it, he started drafting something new. It wasn't a film. It wasn't a speech. It was an idea. A scholarship program. Not a big one, not loud, not even branded with his name. Just a quiet fund for quiet people. By the end of the week, it had a name, the Quiet Ones Fund. He decided it would support underprivileged students in 3 specific areas: voice, poetry, and composition. Not just for the best, not for the most polished, but for those with something inside they hadn't found the words for yet. He outlined everything on paper, then reached for his phone and called Sophia. She picked up immediately. "I have a question," he said. "That sounds serious," she replied. "Would you run something for me?" There was a pause. He explained the idea, where it came from, what it would look like, how it wouldn't be tied to publicity, how it would live quietly, like the people it was meant to serve. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Yes." Just like that?" he asked. "You already know why." She didn't need to hear more. The next few weeks moved slowly but steadily. Keanu funded the first year's endowment personally. He worked with a small team of education advisors and arts educators to develop the application process. There were no essays about success or ambition, just a few simple questions. What do you wish someone had heard in you? What would you say if you knew someone was listening? And what does quiet mean to you? The answers that came back were more than expected. Some students submitted audio recordings of poems whispered into cheap microphones. Others mailed in lyrics written in the margins of homework assignments. One boy submitted a single line, "I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I think it's something." Keanu circled that one. Sophia took her new role seriously. She didn't pose for press photos. She didn't update her bios. She just built the framework, reached out to music teachers in rural districts, called after-school poetry programs that had lost funding. She knew where to look, and the applications kept coming. They launched the program with no press release. Just a single-page website with a quiet message. For those who've never raised their hand. For those who have something to say but no one waiting to hear it. This space is yours. The Quiet Ones Fund. The logo was simple. No bright colors, no slogans. Just the phrase, "Only the quiet remain." It was Lily who chose the font. She said it should feel handwritten, like someone left a note just for you. The first round of recipients came from places most people had never heard of. Small towns, overlooked neighborhoods, districts where music classes had been cut for years. There was no competition, no ranking, just a slow, careful selection of voices that hadn't yet found their stage. One was a girl from Montana who wrote songs in her barn and recorded them on a cassette player from the 90s. Another was a boy from Newark who wrote spoken-word verses during his lunch breaks but never read them aloud. One came from a refugee camp in Jordan, an audio file of a poem in 3 languages layered over birdsong. The fund didn't just support tuition. It paid for instruments, recording equipment, bus fare, books, studio time. Whatever helped make the quiet a little louder without making it louder than the person speaking it. Sophia set up mentorship calls once a month. Not lectures, just conversations. She asked questions and let the students lead. They didn't need polished answers. They just needed someone to ask. Keanu never joined those calls. He didn't want to shift the focus, but he read every letter the students sent in. He listened to every clip. He cried once, late at night, listening to a 14-year-old sing a lullaby she wrote for the brother she'd never met. The recording was raw, with static in the background and the sound of traffic outside the window. But her voice shook, in the same places his had once shaken. He knew she was telling the truth, so he funded her next project himself. No announcement, no condition, just announce, keep singing, you're not alone. Lily framed that message too, just the last line, and placed it beside the framed photo of Keanu and Yusuke. Two pieces of a story that had stretched farther than any of them could have imagined. Vanessa printed out a list of the first 20 recipients and pinned it on the wall of the living room. She didn't say it out loud, but she checked it every few days to see if any names had been added, and they always were, because it turned out the world wasn't lacking in quiet voices. It was just waiting for someone to invite them forward. And now that someone had, not with a stage, but with space, with stillness, with the kind of listening that doesn't ask for applause, only honesty. And in that honesty, something had begun, something that would last far beyond the sound of anyone's song. The lights were dim inside the Ridge Valley Civic Center, but not dark, just quiet. The kind of quiet that came before music or memory or something sacred. It had been a year since the night Keanu sat at the piano and sang a song no one expected to hear. A year since silence became something more than absence. A year since the world slowed down just long enough to listen. The auditorium hadn't changed much. The same rows of burgundy seats, the same long velvet curtains framing the stage, but near the front, third row center, something was different. One chair was marked. A small brass plaque had been added to the wooden backrest. Nothing flashy, just a name and 2 lines. Yusuke Arata, or the voice he gave away. Above it, secured to the seat cushion, sat a black and white photo of the man himself. Mid-laugh, eyes closed, leaning just slightly forward, like he had just said something worth hearing twice. It was the same photo Kaori had mailed, the same one Lily had framed in their home, but now it lived here, where sound once rested and silence had found its echo. Keanu entered alone. He didn't need to announce it. He wore a simple jacket, dark jeans, no sunglasses. He carried no folder, no speech. Only a folded piece of paper in his back pocket. Sophia was already waiting in the aisle, hands folded in front of her, expression still. Lily sat nearby, her camera resting in her lap, though she hadn't turned it on. Keanu stopped at the edge of the row and looked down at the chair. He didn't reach for the photo. He didn't sit beside it. He stood. For a long moment, he just breathed. Then he spoke. "I wasn't ready then," he said quietly. "Not when you handed me the music. Not when you taught me how to sing without performing." His voice didn't shake. It didn't try to fill the space. It simply settled into it. "I carried it anyway. Not perfectly, not always willingly, but I carried it." He paused, because I think some part of me always knew it wasn't mine. His eyes never left the chair. It was a gift meant to be passed on. I just didn't know when. Another pause. Until last year. Behind him, Sophia blinked slowly. Lily watched without speaking. "I never said goodbye properly," Keanu said. "Maybe because I thought I'd failed you. Maybe because I thought silence meant I had forgotten." He lowered his gaze. But silence isn't forgetting. He let that sit, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded paper. He opened it and read from the page. "I remember the first note, the way it trembled. I remember the cracked piano key in your studio, the sound of your pencil tapping against the metronome. I remember the way you said, 'If you sing like you mean it, you never have to sing loud.'" He smiled faintly. "You were right." Then, gently, He refolded the page and placed it beneath the photo on the seat. Keanu stepped back from the seat. He didn't wipe his eyes. He didn't bow. He just stood there for a moment longer, looking not at the photograph but through it, into everything it had come to mean, into every lesson that had taken him years to understand. Behind him, Lily rose and walked down the aisle. Sophia followed. Neither of them spoke as they came to stand beside him. Together they looked at the chair. Then Lily whispered, "He would have loved this." Keanu gave the faintest nod. "I think he would have sat in the back row." Sophia smiled. "And corrected your breath support from 30 feet away." That made Keanu chuckle. Not loudly, but from the chest. A quiet, warm laugh that softened the moment. He turned to them both. "Thank you." Lily tilted her head. "For what?" "For helping me carry it." They stood there in the stillness, not needing to say more. The auditorium held a kind of peace that didn't come often in life. The peace of something complete, of something placed where it was meant to go. After a while, Keanu walked to the stage steps. He climbed them slowly, as if retracing old steps. At the piano, he didn't sit. He just placed one hand gently on the closed lid. Not to play, just to feel it. A year ago, he had stood there alone, holding a song that had been waiting most of his life to be sung. Now he wasn't holding it anymore. He turned to face the empty rows. "They only keep asking if I'll sing again," he said quietly. Lily raised her eyebrows. "Will you?" Keanu shrugged. "Maybe, but not like that." Sophia stepped forward. "Once is enough, when it's real." He nodded, then turned back to the piano, opened the lid and sat, not to perform, but to listen. He pressed one key, a soft, low note. It echoed faintly in the room. Then he stood again and lowered the lid, gently. That was enough. They walked out of the auditorium together. Before leaving, Lily stopped at the memorial seat and adjusted the photograph slightly. She made sure it was centered, that the note Keanu left hadn't shifted. She brushed a small speck of dust from the plaque, then followed the others out the door. As they stepped into the late afternoon sun, the wind picked up. A few leaves scattered across the sidewalk, and the glass doors behind them slowly eased shut. Inside, the chair remained. Not as a symbol, not as a monument, but as a reminder that somewhere, once, a teacher handed a song to a quiet student, and that student, years later, sang it, not for glory, not for approval, but for the ones still waiting for their turn. The room was empty now, but it wasn't silent, because silence, once shared, doesn't disappear. It stays. It listens. And if you're still enough, you can hear it say, "Only the quiet remain." Sometimes, the loudest courage is choosing to be heard when no one expects it. That's what Keanu wrote in his journal the night after he left the auditorium. It was a short entry, no dramatic flourish, just a few quiet sentences on a blank page. But every word felt lived in. "Music is not what I do, it's what I remember." He paused after writing that line, letting the pen rest in his hand. "And tonight, I remembered everything." He didn't mean just the song, or the sound of the piano, or the applause. He meant the feeling of being seen without explanation, of being known without performance, of sharing something once hidden and discovering it was never about perfection, it was about presence. In the weeks that followed, the world moved on. Other stories took over the headlines. Other moments filled the feeds. But something lingered in the corners of conversations. Something that didn't need retweets or ratings. A memory. A note. A note that kept playing long after the stage had gone quiet. And for those who were listening, really listening, it stayed with them. Not as noise, but as permission to speak, to sing, to show up fully, even if your voice shakes. Keanu didn't return to the stage after that. Not right away. He went back to his work, his quiet life, his long walks and short conversations. But those who knew him well could tell something had shifted. He stood taller, not prouder, just more open. Like a door he thought he'd locked for good had been quietly pushed ajar. Lily started writing again, not just poems, but lyrics. She kept a small notebook in her backpack. Sometimes at lunch, she'd step out onto the back stairs of the school and scribble a few lines, not to perform, just to give the thoughts a place to land. Vanessa helped set up a reading night at the local library for students who didn't feel comfortable sharing in front of big crowds. They called it the soft mic. No stage, no timer, no feedback sheets, just listening. Sophia traveled to 4 new states, meeting students who had received the first round of support from the Quiet Ones Fund. She kept a journal, too, filled with their words, their fears, their soft, unpolished beginnings. Keanu read every page she sent him. Late one evening, he added a new line to his journal. Some voices don't want to lead. They just want to be believed. And that was the thread running through everything he had learned. From the boy who once stood silent in the back of the class. From the man who once thought he'd lost his voice. From the teacher who taught him to sing without raising the volume. Now it's your turn to speak. Have you ever hidden a part of yourself because you were afraid no one would understand? Or did someone once tell you that your silence mattered more than your talent? Tell your story in the comments. What hidden gift do you think Keanu should uncover next? Subscribe and join the journey. There's a moment before every note, a breath before every truth, where you decide whether or not to speak. Most people rush through that moment. Some ignore it completely, but a few, very few, pause long enough to feel its weight, and in that pause, they find the courage to let something out they've never said before. That was what the talent show had become for Keanu. Not a performance, not a comeback, a pause. And in that pause, he remembered the boy who once stood in a studio in front of a man named Yusuke, wondering if anyone would ever hear him. He remembered the cracked floor tile, the smell of ink, the way Yusuke said, "If your voice trembles, it means it matters." So he let it tremble. And because he did, others have too. In the time since that night, people from all over the world have shared their moments. Videos, poems, anonymous recordings. One girl sang into her phone under a blanket so no one in her house would hear. One man posted a 2-minute clip of him playing the guitar for the first time in 30 years, his fingers stumbling, his voice barely above a whisper. Each one began the same way. I never thought I'd share this, and yet they did. Because the world had seen someone stand still on a stage and offer something not polished, not loud, not safe, but real. And real invites real. That's what Keanu hopes you carry from this story. Not just the applause, not just the title, but the permission to pause, to remember, to speak when no one expects you to. And if your voice shakes, let it. If your breath catches, hold it. If your truth is small, quiet, unseen, that doesn't make it any less true. In fact, it probably makes it more. So now we ask you, have you ever kept something hidden, not because it wasn't ready, but because the world wasn't? Have you ever whispered a gift into a room that wasn't listening? Or maybe, like Keanu, you were given something once by a teacher, a mentor, a friend, and you've carried it silently for years. What if now is the time to give it breath? If you're ready, tell your story in the comments. And if you're not ready to share it with the world, maybe share it with yourself. Write the first line. Sing the first note. Speak the first word. And if you're wondering what Keanu should uncover next, what quiet gift, what forgotten lesson, what story still waiting to be heard, let us know. Your voice might be the one that starts the next chapter. Subscribe, stay close, and most of all, keep listening, because in the end, only the quiet remain.